I welcome everybody to coming every All right, we are live. We're going to give a couple minutes because there are a few more people walking in. Today we're going over hair request addendum and common practices and best practices. And I'm also going to share the property base 4.0. If you haven't looked at it yet, it's more streamlined for your stuff. That's the same. All right, so let me get to that and see what we're online. We're live now. There you go. So, mark up the small copy. Only with a few people online. Question. All right, 7-day update from last. Sold 964. This is the last 7 days of the year. So we're putting it on. We're selling. So keep at it, and everybody's watching the inventory as we go. But it's nothing has changed yet. Price decreases if you're still close to it. We're still pricing and then still selling. So you listen and sold your company. All right, any questions on the market? Any interesting tidbits from last week? Anybody got any to share? What happened last week? Low interest rates still the same. And all right, so I have the repair request addendum. Amendment. Repair request. So put down the purchase agreement first, and why this form pops up. All right, so on the purchase agreement, we have a buyer's due diligence, correct? Buyer's due diligence. conditioned on buyer's due diligence. This condition is referred to as due diligence condition. It's checked in affirmative section, but it is usually the one, unless you guys are waiving the buyer's due diligence. You may have X amount of calendar days following the date of acceptance to complete buyer's due diligence. Seller agrees to cooperate with buyer's due diligence and keep all your utilities on. So if gas, power, and water are on the seller side, buyer can't complete the due diligence, so they can't even get started on the due diligence. So let's make sure if you're a listing agent, you have all those on, and as a buyer agent, you're double checking to make sure, hey, seller agent, are all these three on so I can get these due diligence. Normally it was like 14 to 20 days, and I think when the market changed, we started shrinking that down. Now it's, I think, on average 7 to 10 days to get the inspection completed. So this number always changes, depending on the market. Okay. And then it goes into what you can do during your due diligence to determine that the property is satisfactory. If buyer cancels this agreement due to a specific inspection report, buyer shall provide seller at the time of cancellation with a copy of the report and the name of the telephone number of the inspection. So if you are just saying, hey, I wasn't happy with what the inspection reported to me, stating that you're going to give them a copy of the inspection. Just standing in practice so we know on the seller side what really, if that was the reason you were canceling. All right, send me the inspection report so you know what to expect. Okay. Buyer's right to cancel. If buyer determines in buyer's sole discretion that the results of the due diligence are unacceptable, buyer may either 1. No later than due diligence period deadline referenced in section 7, cancel the residential purchase agreement after writing written notice to the seller, whereupon the owner's money deposit shall be released to the buyer without requirement of further written authorization. Or if no later than buyer's due diligence resolved in writing with seller any objections buyer has arising from buyer's due diligence. The reason I'm running through the contract is because this references the contract. Okay? So I want you to understand what the contract says versus what this repair request is. Okay? So you do your inspection, you're at day 8, 9, 10 days. Now you've put the seller on notice, right? It's in writing. Right? So what are we doing? For the most part, a buyer as agent is going to take that summary of the property inspection and basically regurgitate it right onto this page, right? You're the buyer's agent, you want as much as possible for the buyer, right? So you're just going to say, this is what the inspector found, here's a copy of the inspection. What do you guys want to do? So, request for repair, number 1. And I believe we took that. It used to be called an addendum. Now it's no longer an addendum. It's just a back and forth request type scenario. Buyer hereby notifies the seller of the following response and request for repair. So the buyer has an option here. I like to have this on file. That's why whenever you guys mark a due diligence period, it automatically prompts this in your property base. So if you said 0 due diligence and you're waiving everything, it's going to prompt like a waiver due diligence versus after your 10 days, or you kind of want to see where it went with this. Okay? Because on this, it gives you, buyer has reviewed and approved the home inspection and removes the home inspection contingency. So if that's it, then we don't need anything else on that, right? It's just, hey, the buyer's okay, we're removing the contingency, and we gave notice to the seller, and we're ready to go. We found some chips in the wall, something minor that nobody really cares about. Okay? Sure. You said that you made the period on the contract, and you said it's going to cost another form. The contract itself is good, but I think in our back office it's going to say we want to see a waiver. The reason being is because it affects your E&O policy. So there's a waiver in the contract, which is fine. So that means you have to, if you put no, it's not conditioned upon it. Now on the back page, you need to check mark, the drop down menu for the inspection. You need to drop down and you need to change them all to waive. So that's signed off and waived. Now if you have it drop down and it says buyers to pay for it, but you put waiving, so if this part so if you check is not conditioned, so you're just gonna not do anything. But you come down to property inspection and you negate it by putting buyer, waive the energy audit, you waive that, you know what I mean? You turn this in and it says that inspection is still have the right to do a buyer to do it, even though they're waiving the due diligence period. We're still gonna walk out with. So when you fill out your purchase agreement, if you're waiving everything, make sure that you can check mark and coincide with everything on section 7 is not. And then it won't prompt any form. But if you do check mark it, it's going to prompt something else.
So is it unheard of to have one waive it and still
Yep.
because you still want it like on
Yep. That means you're doing it. Yeah. No. It should. You can at the bottom where this will just prompt automatically, and then there's a request exemption, and just say buyer purchase wasn't conditioned upon inspection. The reason it prompts for us, so that you guys understand the broker side of it, is if you are ever get in trouble and you have to open an E&O policy, well, that's a $2,500 deductible. Right? So what I'm trying to do for you guys is reduce costs as much as possible. So in our policy, if we have a inspection done and we've offered home warranty options, there in some instances, if you were to open the E&O policy, you wouldn't have the deductible. And we could say, hey, we're going to run through this with the E&O insurance, and you won't have the deductible. They'll tell us at the end, but we try to do as much as possible with risk reduction so that you guys don't have like bigger bills out of pocket if something were to happen. So we had to go back to this file, say 2 years down the road. So the client got pissed off 2 years down the road and said, hey, we didn't do enough due diligence or whatnot. When we go back to the file, we look at it, because we have to hold it for 5 years, and say, well, what was done during the file? So we're looking for the home inspection, we're looking for the home warranty, and due diligence period. Was there enough time? Was there enough disclosure? And that's what we're trying to cover in the file. That makes sense. So it covers you guys in the long run, because I have to have these for 5 years. So I'm looking at that 5-year file holding option. And you guys have to choose, you have to store the file. Okay, so, and this contract will negate itself all the way through. So you can always try to argue if you want to make sure it's clean and precise. Okay, so the second choice would be buyer requests that seller perform the following repairs before closing escrow. And then it goes on to say all repairs except general home maintenance, which would be like changing the air filter or screwing on like an anti-siphon to the hose bib or something. Or to be done by a licensed Nevada contractor, the buyer reserves the right to approve the repairs on walkthrough inspection and as set forth in the purchase agreement. Buyer acknowledges that this request for repair does not absolve the buyer of any obligation under the residential purchase agreement. So basically, it's just notice to repair, and if they don't want to, then that's what changes. So you're initiating this with a copy of the inspection report so they know what came up during the inspection, and then they have the their obligation, which is the second response. So the seller can say, I do not, or agree to correct everything that you guys put in the front page, or 2, declines to request or, to do any repairs, or 3, instead of all of them, I'll do X, Y, and Z, right? And the seller sends that back. Is that complete if the seller says agrees to correct all? What do you think? So I list everything out in the summary, and the number 2, seller agrees to correct all. He says, yeah, fine, and signs off on it. Are you guys done?
So the buyer has to accept that.
Yes. The buyer still has to accept that response. This comes up a lot because we're trying to remove the home inspection contingency. And I think an argument that comes up a lot is, well, buyer was past the due diligence. Like if you send this on day 9 and the seller doesn't respond till day 11, well, they've been on notice that you're not moving forward, right? So we need a seller's response. Or are we canceling, or are we moving forward? So this is where your earnest money deposit comes into to play. So you want to get working on this as fast as possible, because they're going to say, well, you have to get an earnest deposit. So you have a cash buyer, right? Cash buyer does their inspection, notifies you on day 10, and all of the rest of your conditions are done. Well, you guys still haven't resolved this. So you want to get this resolved before that period of time, so that you don't have any earnest money issues, right? Or extend due diligence. So say the seller says, I agree to correct all, signs off, do you think you're done? Well, what if the buyer still wants to cancel? Well, they still have that option, right? If they're still within the due diligence period. Said, no, I don't want those repaired anymore, I want to cancel. They can still cancel, because that's still an option for them. Because you have to present this whole entire form before your buyer executes it, so they fully understand it. That's your job, right? So you send it to the buyer says, that's fine, let's go ahead and request it. You're expecting it to come back. Same with the listing agent. You have the obligation to tell the seller, hey, just because we're agreeing to correct everything, they still have to accept, respond to make this a finalized repair request, right? It's kind of kooky, but that's just the way it works, so that we know that everybody's on the same page in regards to the repair request. So the faster you guys can get through it, the faster you can explain it to your clients, the safer the transaction can move forward. Yeah, it's kind of silly, but yeah, they can fill out a second one if they wanted, if they want any additional inspections done, and then they can request an extension for due diligence right here at the bottom. So if you seller says no, I'm only going to fix A, B, and C, D, E, and F are out of the picture, then you're back to negotiations, right? And maybe you want to have an AC guy come out, so you need 10 days for HVAC company to come out and look at these two. That can be accomplished all in this with a back and forth versus addendum 1, addendum 2, addendum 3. It still works, but we try to keep it in one form for you guys, so that's that portion of due diligence that we're dealing with. All right, so let's go through best practices. So best practices as a buyer. What do you guys do for your buyers? Should be pretty simple. You're kind of just regurgitating the summary, right? Or me, I ask them, what do you want? When we went through the home inspection, what do you want the seller to fix from this home inspection? Do you care about a chip tile? Do you care about sink head in the kitchen that's dripping, which you're going to replace anyway? You've already said you're going to replace that. You know what I mean? They're walking through the house and they're just say what they're going to. I'm going to take this door out, put a barn door in. I'm going to take these shelves out and do this. So you ask them, what do you want in it? It's your buyer request, right? And so then as a seller, what's your standard practice for seller's response, right? A a lot of sellers don't have time to do any repairs, right? They've already moved out of the house, or they're, 2 weeks in living in Minnesota or something, or Texas. They don't want to come back here and manage repairs, nor do you, right? Nobody wants to go out and get quotes for fixing things. So for me, if you can get both people to agree to a credit so that this buyer can get it done for himself, what you need to realize though is, and I get it a lot with, hey, the seller's buying a home warranty, so that should cover everything, right? Well, now that we've done a home inspection, before that home warranty goes into policy, if it's not already on the home during the listing, now this is considered a pre-existing condition and would not be covered by the home warranty. So you have to have that conversation about the home warranty, right? Well, we have a home warranty, but we know about these, so you have to repair these on your own. So a credit from the seller would negate getting any repairs done, and it would absolve the due diligence issue if you can get away with it. Otherwise, you're negotiating with her. That's your job. That's what you're getting paid the commission to do, right? Just repair for request. So you would address it in here, right? But it's not. This isn't an addendum, right? This is just a side hustle for both parties, right? You can't submit this to escrow and give them instructions off of this, right? So if you were to do a credit, I always put seller to credit, buyer towards any and all closing costs, X amount of dollars, whatever you guys come up with. And sometimes the buyer will just get a bunch of quotes like, hey, what's the cost to fix this? What's the cost to fix that? Same with the seller, so they try to figure out a balanced number. And then seller will put credit in an addendum and instruct escrow. So in that instance, you just get that, whether it's a $500, whether it's $1,000 credit, addendum to purchase agreement, just put in there. Seller gives credit for buyer for any and all closing costs. Doesn't have to go into the extent of what it is. It's just a credit. You know that the credit in regards to this and for the buyer to sign off removing the due diligence or the home inspection contingency. And then you just put that in the escrow. They'll sign that at closing. Credits can go towards closing costs. They can go towards the price of the home, whatever is necessary, or however big that credit is. It should just offset the closing costs. But yes, you'll have to do that on a separate agreement. Any questions about the separate addendum? So this is, in this essence, is just a hash out repairs from the home inspection, right? Yep. And that's, it can get complicated. So I always say keep it as simple as possible. So if you're just regurgitating what somebody else said, and then like you're getting rid of credits and two repairs, or credits in one repair, or something like that, that's fine. So that you know at walkthrough time, that's what you're checking for. If it was like the knob when you turn on the stove or something, if it's sticky and dirty, make sure you turn that knob on. And you guys verify that at the walkthrough. If you will check, if you will scan the file. I think that's it for the third one. That's what we got. So next should be property based. If you guys can see something, give me a question. Mark, it's just me monitoring here on this. So I have to walk over to the screen and look for questions. So let me know if you guys have any questions. Okay. And I'll check it in now. All right, any other questions on due diligence? how do you extend the time of due diligence also? I try not to alter this contract a lot, but I know a lot of agents will state buyer's due diligence to be extended however many days it is to resolve the request for first. Is that simple enough? Does everybody understand it? So if you put that in your counter offer or your initial term, that will just automatically extend the due diligence period versus letting it expire and having to argue that at day 11 because sellers isn't. Because you know they're not all good enough to consider. You're trying to get a deal done, right? And most of them will understand it if it says we're just extending it to cover it. Because it really doesn't. It somewhat covers it, but then again, it doesn't cover it. Because it's when you initiate it, hey, I'm not happy, and I would like these things done, you're technically putting the seller on notice that you're not going to move forward. Right? That should end, or it should stop your due diligence from expiring. But does it when this is set for calendar days? That's the part that everybody argues differently. So CYA, if you can get it extended, or even when you send this over in the with all of the return requests, just put it in file due diligence to extend until this is resolved. So you can put it right in there. Kind of got something in writing already. You guys know to do negotiating term, and it gives everybody something to go on besides making it through them. Alright, so this is now our 4.0. And it just kind of like streamlined our top page there. So Connect is still where you're going to go for people in Mexico, but it's in your calendar account. Where your docs are going to be in your Connect, so you can train your Connect. I don't know why they didn't do it. Everything's in there now, it's all under one page instead of tabs at the top. And same with transactions. So I've activated it, so I'm trying to only use this now so I get used to it because as of November 21st or something like that, and it's not going to be available. The old one. So if you're getting used to looking at the old one, we're just trying to go right to this new one, which is more compatible on your tablet and your mobile device. This is what it looks like on a desktop. And you can search for your transactions by the street name, or if you just click the search bar, it'll pop up all of them. And then you've got global identity that you have, and then they want, mainly for us, if there's transactions more than you guys in. Promotes, they're going to be where you can find all your brochures, flyers, postcards, all of our vendors that are here at the office. You just click them, and that's it. Y'all look for them, and you just click on them. You can find them both. Right, and then in Learn, there is So these ones right here, when you click on them, if I wasn't tapping the plan, it'll give you like overviews of how to run the little hamburger up here, and what all of these are for. We can start next. It's just more streamlined. So still get the orange tabs for things you're missing. Okay? But the orange that means something missing, so we're looking for it. Just kind of prompt it. And details and always. So one thing in this is that if you guys answer the questions right, it moves us through a little bit further so you can see how far along you guys are in your contract. So we always want like the closing date. That I think this is a good seller. And obviously there's closing date if there's a listing, but you do have when your contract was executed, and it should conflict with listing. But once you answer, you guys have all started this transaction, right? It just starts asking questions. So 10 simple questions. Once you answer them, it moves you to the next step. Answer them. That way we have the dates in there. We're starting to audit ghost, I call them ghost files, where nobody answered questions. Because we're looking for start contract dates and end contract dates. Because our job as far as storing is what are the contractual obligations. So if a listing is expired and nobody went in and withdrew it, it's just still sitting there as a ghost file. We're trying to find the listing dates that ended it. And then as far as a buyer, if you open a contract and the buyer cancels before your due diligence, if you didn't go in there and say, there's two questions on the buyer cancellation. There's a yes, there's EMD that needs to be released, or no, there's no EMD that needs to be canceled. That's the easiest one. If there's no EMD at escrow, it cancels the file for us, so we don't get the archive, and we don't have to worry about it anymore. But if there is an EMD, we need that question answered. You know, we're 6 months past on a closing, and we message you guys and say, hey, this file didn't close. It was supposed to close, 2 months ago. And we get, well, oh yeah, that file canceled. Well, you still got an obligation to cancel it out, so we don't have ghost files with them. Otherwise, they just sit there with no compliance, no anything. And the only ones that I'm looking for are whether or not there's EMD disputes. So I've dealt with 2 in the last 90 days, so I'm starting to audit files a little bit more. Because I had an EMD that wasn't settled from 2 years ago. Not 2 years ago, 1 year ago, and then I had an EMD that wasn't settled from 6 months ago. Then nobody checkmarked that there was outstanding earnest money in pockets. In fact, I think one of them was just closed out. Someone said, no, there's no EMD. But I got a call from escrow, seller, buyer agent saying, no, we still got earnest money that was never resolved. And we need to know about those as soon as possible because your mediation expires at, I think you have up to 90 days after the transaction. I think it's 90 days to file for mediation, which is part of the contract. And if you don't do it, then they're kind of waiving the mediation dates. So anything beyond that is now legal, which would cost you guys money if they brought you into it. My agent did this, and I get that a lot. My agent said this. My agent did that. Well, now you're just brought into a lawsuit, and nobody wants to do that. When it was these last 2 that I dealt with was a simple 5-minute conversation with both parties. Yeah, we resolved it. Because most of the time, EMD disputes are mostly it's the buying agent and the listing agent that don't agree. That's the can answer the questions, that will eliminate any questions as to where the file's at. Plus it prompts it for you guys in your, it prompts it for your file that you're ready to go. Let's see the file. And anytime when you guys are uploading, just give us a ring. These are, it's pretty simple to get things done here. So once you answer the questions, I put them all right here so you know. Different programming, September 30th, 2 days, September 1st. Then it will prompt all of your calendar. Because this is kind of how we keep up. So it's called your snapshot, and you guys can pull this up whenever you guys have these transactions going. So when you put your dates in, these will prompt in your calendars. So if you have your calendar synced with whatever, iCalendar, Google Calendar, and your Outlook calendar, all these will prompt and put a little, flag on those dates so you know that those dates are coming up. For us, on our compliance end, we know that we're looking for closing packages for you guys, and we're starting to run compliance so there's no delay in you getting paid. So when I have closing dates and we're past contingency dates, we know that 2 or 3 days after that closing date, we're looking for a closing package. So you don't want to go beyond those closing dates. When the ghost files go beyond, we're only looking at the week of that September. What do I got coming in? Who do we have to pay? And we get all that from you guys to answer each one. Start date, contract date, due diligence, contingency date, contracted closing date, and how much money is coming in. The top ones, the build report entries, that's only to prompt your lead-based paint disclosures, inspections, when the inspection is produced, so that we know to look for whether or not this was resolved. Okay? There's going to be a lot more questions on this property date, so I just wanted to touch base today with just a general census for it, so you guys start using it. The other one's going to be open for a while, so you can open up the old one if you get confused. But if you can start using this one, that one's going to disappear in November. There's a couple other things that are disappearing in October. I'm sure you get the prompts for MLS numbers are going away up in October. And that's going to be a new one for a lot of us old timers that are used to searching 303, 606, 505, to now have to learn geographical or satellite map. But I guess it's a county that's not doing the numbers anymore. That's it. And Touch is good. Touch is good. It makes things faster. Do you guys use the MLS Touch when you're out showing? Yeah. You like the comparable button?
I don't really use those on the everything else that's sometimes I'm on about.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I was with a business client of mine. We were talking about one of these buildings Sunday, but then his wife was with us, and she wanted to see a house, which is right around the corner from his office. And I said, no problem. I'm on Touch. Pull it up. ran through it. Hey, Corey, can you send me the comp on this? Because I think we're going to go through it. Here's the comparable button at the top left that will generate half a mile, quarter mile. You select it. And you sure, team check in, you guys can review it. And it's already set to do 10% of the square footage up or down of that property that you're looking at. So if you have that detail on it, so just touch it right there. It's amazing. So MLS Touch is your mobile app. You know, so there's a couple that I keep in the storage folder. Call it realtor, right? So in that one, you have the Century key that you can access. You should keep showing time in there, so you can make showing time appointments. And the other one's called MLS Touch. Okay? So in MLS Touch, you can create your own app also, which is called MLS Client. So create that app, send it to yourself, store it in there, because then you can just keep sharing that app. And what that app is basically gives your client access to MLS Touch. So MLS Touch is basically our mobile matrix. Okay? So you can go in there, look at my listings, blah, 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 or advanced search, look, whatever house you're looking for. If you click on a property, it brings up MLS details, right? So you can share the details with your client, and there's a comparable button, which I thought was really cool. Like, there's a showing request, print, add to cart. You can go in there and read your agent remarks, what the showing capabilities are. The fact that it does the comparable for blew my mind this weekend. So, so if you hit, you have property open, and then you hit the comparables. I shrunk it down to half a mile, and I just said recently sold. And price range plus or minus 10%. You can shrink that down further if you want to push it to 5%. Ignore bedrooms. And when it gives you the list, at the top right, you can send by email, send by SMS. You see it? Yeah. So then they just have it in their phone. It just sends them a link. Super cool. And they all, and the smaller distance you go, it should prompt everything like within that price range too. It's kind of cool. But yeah, I did. I preached this one, the MLS client. So if you hit the more button, there's a brand and share button at the top. We went through this before in one of the classes. I can do it again. But once you put your logo in, what you guys want to prepare, and then you just hit share my app, it gives you guys a link. You can text it to them. And what it does is it prompts their iPhone or the iStore or Google Store to download the app. I just keep it right here. I'm on client. And send it. It's a good one to share if you're at open houses. Hey, do you guys want my app so you can search for homes in the same area? And then it gathers their information for you. You can actually do a QR code, so you can just do a QR on and you scan my app, and then try to capture their information. So this is all in your realtor stuff. I try to bring them up when we can. There's so much. I mean, that's why we pay the $1,000 annually to have these tools. And the fact that we're just one MLS is a blessing for all of you guys, versus like having 10 MLSs for Los Angeles County, or if you're selling San Diego, 8%. 5 MLS would be something. So you have one that covers everything that you could possibly want to sell, except for Northern. All right, so play with that. It's kind of cool. It's got calculators for them, so they can like run their payments. Try to keep it simple. Got my agent. When you hit my agent, like, oh, let's call Corey real quick and see if we can do something for us. And they're constantly changing things. So Century Key, MLS Touch, and Showing Time. And then MLS Client is your guys' first branded app that you guys can create for people. And then just stuck in your phone under My Realtor. All right. Any other questions? Okay. That's it. Anything you want me to go over? I think next week I have some questions in here. All right. Past that, well, I might have missed this, but when can we start using the new site? Because the site's active. So at the top of the old one, the top of the old one, it says update with 4.0, and you just click it and it will open it. And then you can save that as you're starting to see if I can do the old one. Anyways, it's at the top. I can show you later on. Anyways, it's difficult to hear and follow online. I don't know if Corey addressed it over there on the transactions will automatically populate into a newer version of the back office. The systems are mirrored. They're exactly the same. You can work out of both of them right now. But after the end of November, it's going to look like this. Same system, same storage process, just a different look, and it looks different on your phone when you look at that. All right, I think those are all the online questions. Maybe bad about taking online questions. Sorry, guys. Yeah. So the hamburger brings up the down. Just another place to pull up documents besides transaction docs, which I think most of you guys are pulling up because that's linked to OpEx Sign. So probably when you get activated in MLS, this is where the transaction goes, or I'm sorry, all the documents are. And there is Authentic Sign, which I believe is being upgraded too. So to be more secure and more advanced. For you guys excited to Authentic. I think that's we're using most of our forms. If you need forms on the fly, our backpack also has a form updated. You can show that. So by representation, got other presentations where we go and bring up report here. All right, that's all I have for today. I wanted to touch base on the request workload because that's always a complicated one. So the sooner you can address it, the better off you guys will be with that due diligence. Or just get it signed and says they approve and then move it on. Life is good. Still low interest rates, so keep bringing buyers to the market. Sellers, start reaching out. A lot of them are, trying to figure out their forbearance and trying to cash out. We probably get a bunch of listings right now. You just gotta find people that are ready to sell, right? And get a commission. Questions now. And then, all right, I'm good. If you guys need anything, you know where to find me. We will end this episode. If you want to get through it, it's still archived in our YouTube channel. Or if you just need me, I'll answer it.